Okay, the time now is 3:30 p.m. We will go ahead and get started with today's presentation. My name is Veronica Parker with AEBG TAP. And for today's presentation, we have Penny Pearson, Coordinator of Distance Learning Projects with OTAN, and she will be presenting on using free, openly licensed materials for adult learners. Before she gets started, I'd like to go over a few housekeeping items. If you have any questions, please be sure to post them in the chat pod. Throughout the presentation, Penny will be addressing your questions, so please be sure to post any questions you have in the chat pod. If she does not get to your question immediately, that's okay. We'll make sure that we have time at the end to answer any questions you may have. This webinar will be recorded and available on the new California Adult Education website. So if you have to leave for any reason or you'd like to come back to this webinar recording or the materials at a later time, you will be able to do so. I'll post the URL for exactly where these materials will be posted on the new California Adult Education website. If you're experiencing any technical difficulties, like I said before, please be sure to let us know in the chat pod and we will address your issues via a private chat. If you would like to, if you're hearing an echo at this time, which I don't believe anyone signed in more than once, but if there was a number 2 next to your name, that's a clear indication that you are signed in more than once. So you want to log out of Adobe Connect, come back in, and that should fix that issue. Upon completion of this webinar today, an evaluation will appear on your screen. Please be sure to fill out this evaluation and let Penny know what you thought about today's presentation. If you are in need of any additional technical assistance or professional development, or if you want to just provide general feedback, we would greatly appreciate it. Now we'll turn it over to Penny, who will get us started with today's presentation. Penny?
Thank you, Veronica, and welcome everyone. As Veronica said, my name is Penny Pearson, and my email address and contact information is here on the slide. I encourage you, if you have any questions, you can email me directly, and I'll be happy to help you. So today we've got some basic things we're going to go over, is really looking at what is an open educational resource, often called OER, and then looking at some licensing that has to do with copyright information and how the licenses work. And then I'll show you some information about open textbooks, tools, etc. And I'm getting a little note here. Am I too loud for everybody? Am I like really blasting your earballs here? I can pull this down a little bit, I think. Does that sound a little better? So you don't get hurt eardrums. So we'll also look at some of the reasons why districts, schools, agencies are working on using open textbooks, and most of the time that's due to cost benefits. So hopefully we can have some discussions toward the end of our time here today that, for you to put some ideas and concerns or questions in the chat pod, because I really do want to ask you to engage with this conversation today. So we'll take a look here about what exactly are open educational resources. And this is a fairly typical and common definition of open educational resources. This one was actually taken directly out of our United States Office of Educational Technology National Ed Tech Plan. And I know that everyone out there uses this for evening reading, but if you haven't read it, it is fairly interesting. And I think when you look at this definition, those words that are in bold, I bolded them, I added that emphasis, because I want you to understand that these are really, this is kind of earth-shattering in many ways when they first started to promote and license for open educational resources. And they've actually been around since 2001. So we're growing. Last count we had over 1.4 billion artifacts licensed in this way. So they're these resources for teaching and learning that reside in the public domain, or they have an intellectual property license that allows for this sharing and accessing and repurposing. So this is another common definition for it. You'll see that it is pretty much the same. One thing that you will hear from me over and over again is that as you make and go forward in this domain of looking at open educational resources, it's going to be up to you to always check the license. So I have a question for you. If you find something on the internet, and this is any number of things, you find a lesson plan, you find a book, you find a picture, you see something that you like a piece of music. Is it free? Give me an answer in the chat pod. Oh, Veronica's first. No. Joyce is adding if it's in the public domain. Anybody else going to venture a guess? Okay, so here's my short answer is always going to be no. But then you always have to add in, well, okay, it depends. You know, it's kind of like that old saying your mom might have said, you know, if it's too good to be true, it probably is. You know. So the technology of our whole big wide network right now is that we have this access to all of these materials, but everything that you find on the internet are still some kind of work of a creative mind. It is intellectual property. Somebody created it, and it is thereby protected by law. So you have to assume that everything you find on the net is owned by someone, which means you have to take a couple extra steps to see how you can use it. So that's why, as we move forward, we're going to talk about what are these OERs, and we're going to talk about the licensing that allows you to know right up front of that type of material how you can use it. How is it available to you? How can you actually revise it or remix it, which has to do with what are open educational resources. So pretty much anything you can put on the internet. You know, it could be podcasts. I don't know if anybody likes listening to podcasts or maybe audiobooks. You can look for lesson plans. There's games online. There's simulations. All of these things that you can make digital can be an open educational resource. So you're not limited in terms of, you know, what if I just search for something online, yes, it's protected by copyright, but maybe there's something else out there that could be an open educational resource. When we talk about open educational resources, we're looking at this whole idea of licensing. And the two big ones here in terms of open licenses and public domain is important, because just because something is openly licensed doesn't mean that the copyright has been abandoned. Okay, so we'll kind of explain this as we go along here. Anything that you find in the public domain means that the copyright holder, the creator, the person who put that particular item up, has waived all of their ownership. So if I were to post an image of a polar bear and Veronica came along and she really liked it, under intellectual property, she would have to ask my permission to use that polar bear. And I could tell her, okay, yeah, you can use it, but you can't do these things to it. If I released all of my copyrights to that polar bear, she can take that polar bear and turn it purple if she wants using Photoshop. She can put a mustache on it if she wants in Photoshop, or if her own ink pen, doesn't matter. So I, as the owner of that polar bear, give it up. An open license, however, is a copyright license that basically says I, as the author, the owner of that thing, can grant any type of rights to the public to reproduce it or to create something with it. So when we talk about open educational resources, we're talking about this open license piece here on the right side. I still own that picture of the polar bear, but because I can use an open license, I can tell Veronica how she can use that particular image or lesson plan or simulation or whatever it was that I actually created. Okay, so there's some basic foundational pieces for an open license, and these were coined by kind of the father of open educational resources, David Wiley, and these are the 5 R's of open. So I'm not going to read these for you, but you can read them and kind of read the text along with it. And these are things that refer to how does this license work when it is assigned to a piece of intellectual property. So all of these things, as you read through them, if you have any questions about one of them, 2 of them, whatever, now's the time to ask, because you need to understand these 5 basic R's of open licensing, because we're going to go into that next, and I want you to understand how they apply. So any questions? I'm going to take a little pause here, give a moment. I don't see anybody typing, so we must be okay. Everybody gets it. So far, so good? Okay. Now, you can always post a question at any time. But you do need to remember that these 5 R's are the foundation of how the people that needed and wanted this method of licensing work in order to approach the Copyright Office and say, okay, we have a solution. Because when they went to the Copyright Office and said, hey, we want to have a way to give permission to people to use our work. How do we do that? And the Copyright Office says, well, we don't know. Figure it out. So they came up with this licensing scheme, and it's through this organization called Creative Commons. And Creative Commons allows you to license your work. So what this is, it's a modified copyright license. So if you think of copyright, when you saw, like we call it the big C in the circle, it meant all rights were reserved. You couldn't do anything with this particular thing, the picture of the polar bear, unless you got express permission from the creator, from the person who owned the intellectual property. So you may think about you as a teacher, or if you're an administrator and your teachers are creating materials, and they're going out and they're grabbing information off the web. They're taking images, they're taking copies of lesson plans, any number of things. Are they aware of the property rights of that particular thing? And this is where this licensing scheme allows us to determine how the author intended that work to be used. Now, this particular graphic here on the left-hand side, where at the top where it's green and it says the most open, it means that those licenses align the closest with those 5 R's. Do you remember those 5 R's here? So I want to be able to keep it as my own, retain it. I want to reuse it in some way. I want to revise it. I want to change its color. Maybe I want to translate it. I want to remix it with something else. So I want to take that picture and I want to put it in my own lesson plan, create something new with it, and I want to redistribute it. I want to give it to my learners. I want to give it to my teachers in different formats. So these licenses, these icons you see here, the most common here are at the top in this green area, and CC0, this first one at the top here, means that it's public domain. All of those copyrights have been released. The one, the little guy with the circle around him, that's called by. It's attribution. It's credit. It means, like in that example I used earlier with Veronica taking the picture of my polar bear, if I licensed my work as Creative Commons by, BY, or Creative Commons attribution, it says she just needs to give me credit, that she got this picture of the polar bear from Penny, and maybe she's made modifications to turn him purple or whatever. The other ones that are listed here, I'm going to go to another slide that kind of gives a little more detail so you can see what each license means individually, and you get used to these icons that are being used. These icons are actually quite popular the world over, and they're actually part of the Museum of Modern Art, and they have really garnered a lot of interest in how we can license our own creations and how we want others to use them, and then how we can find other people's work and use it ourselves. So each one of these, there's the by, which is attribution. SA means to share alike. NC, in this particular case, it's that $ with the slash in it, means that it's for non-commercial use. And then you have NC and SA, which means non-commercial and share alike. And the ND stands for no derivatives, no changes in this particular item. And then the very bottom one is really not an open license, but it certainly tells individuals how they can use my work. So if my polar bear example, if I license it as this bottom one on the right that says CC by NC ND, so that's Creative Commons attribution, got to give me credit, non-commercial, you can't sell my picture, and no derivatives, you can't turn my polar bear purple. But you can still use my stuff. Okay, so I'm going to let that settle in for a second, and if you have any questions, now's the time to ask, because I have one more graphic to show you about these licenses. I'm hearing crickets in the room. No questions? You sure? Okay. I'll move forward. And I do want you to know that the presentation here that I'm giving you is also available in the little downloads pods there, the resource pods on the lower left-hand corner of your screen. So you can take a copy of this, and all of the slides have the notes of what I'm talking about, including links to other resources. So I encourage you to download it. So this is another way to look at the licenses. This one comes from New Zealand, but they did a nice way of showing folks, if someone uses my stuff, can they use it in certain ways? Yes, Anthony, you asked, there are proper ways to attribute or attribute, depending on who you talk to. Yes, and there's an acronym for it, actually, called TASL, T-A-S-L, and it means title, author, source, and license. So in the case of my polar bear, the title of my image could be Polar Bear, right? The author is Penny Pearson. The source could be from my web page or from Flickr or wherever I might have posted it. Right? And then the license would be, how do I say you could use that license? In the sense it would be CC by or CC by SA, that kind of thing. Okay? So, and this particular slide just says, okay, can someone use my work to make money? No or yes, depending on whether it's non-commercial or not. Thank you, Veronica, for putting that in there. Title, author, source, and license. And I usually try to put up a little image of a tassel at the same time. It helps people to remember those acronyms. So, you know, a lot of times folks get a little taken aback that there are folks that will create something and allow it to be used for commercial use. And it is mostly because I think a change in culture. We're moving more and more toward kind of this gig economy, more toward a sharing economy. And this doesn't mean that you as a creator can't make a profit. It just means that you're willing to share your own work for others to use. And many times when it's a case of, you know, this making money piece, you will have authors approach you and say, hey, I'd like to use your work. Can I buy the license to use this even though it's CC BY because I'm going to sell the work? Other times they're not. They're just not going to ask. And so you have to make that decision of how you want to license your work. But it's also important for you to understand how an author intended their work to be used. Because when you find these licenses on the work, then you will know exactly how the author intended you as a user of that work to incorporate that work into your own works. And that's why these licenses are so important. Okay? So these are just kind of the icons that you'll see a lot as you start working on finding resources. You'll use those icons as a guide, and most of the time those icons lead directly back to Creative Commons, so you can read about how that license applies to the work that you want to do. So this is a current state of affairs. We called it the state of Creative Commons. As I said before, it has grown. You can see on this little chart from 2006, we had about 140 million resources out there. And now we have this whole 2017, we're up to 1.4 billion assets out there. So it's a really good way of being able to share, and it's a really good way for us to find resources that we can use with our learners. And thank you, Anthony, for posting that, the wiki post from Creative Commons. It's a great resource to understanding the best ways to make attribution. The title, author, source, and license is like the cream of the crop. Sometimes you can get all that information, sometimes you can't. And that little attribution document that he's posted there is a nice way to understand when you can't get all of this information. So I'm going to just pause for a second. We've covered a lot. We've defined OER. We've looked at the 5 R's of openness. We've looked at the difference between open and public domain. And we've looked at licensing. So before we go any farther, do you have anything in particular that you want to use as an open educational resource? Are you looking for particular resources that you want to use in your teaching? Or if you're an administrator, are you looking for particular resources that you can incorporate within your agency for you or your teachers to use? Nothing. Okay, trying to give enough of that pause. And if you'll notice on this slide, do you see that I had at the bottom there, I had the word conversation, and then there's that icon with CC BY. So in this particular case, that is a link. The word conversation is a link to that particular license for that resource. So I'm not going to see this pop up. I don't think you'll see it on the screen, but this comes out of a site that's got a long URL. I don't know if you can see it there on the screen, but if I were to click that, it would take me to that image that I'm using for questions or comments. Okay, so let's take a look at some of these resources that you might find out there. So we're going to talk next about repositories, and these are places where these OERs are housed, and then we'll look at some adult education resources and some open textbooks. I'm a fan of looking at repositories. So there's several here that I'm going to go ahead and try to share with you on the screen. The first one here is for textbooks out of Open Washington, Washington State, and in this case there's also a link here to Everett Community College. They have some wonderful resources on open textbooks. See if I can get this to open. We'll see if it shows up on the screen. And it didn't, so let me come over here. There we go. So on the page, you'll see here, these are textbook resources, and they have a link, the bar up here, navigation bar here, of finding OER, so you can find videos or images or course materials. I'm on the page for textbooks. So these are all different textbook resources where you can go in and simply click on one of them and find resources for that in that particular repository, and these all are geared toward, as I said, textbooks. So if I look at BC Campus, this is a Canadian organization, they have a whole list of curated open textbooks that you can use, and it has a way to go in and look at, they've got videos of them, and they give you tutorials so you can see the licenses. And here there's CC BY, which again is Creative Commons Attribution. So they give you a sample of the attribution here, and then you can go through, and if I were to look for a textbook here, see if I can get to this really fast. So let's find a textbook. Can somebody give me a shout out into the chat pod of what you might be looking for? We can try to search for it, or we can go by their table of contents here. So I know we've been doing a lot with workforce readiness, so maybe under recreation and tourism you want to look for a textbook on hospitality. Well, here we have one, an introduction to tourism and hospitality. So I can see that it's faculty reviewed, it has been adopted, it is accessible. So for those of you that are working in that field right now to make materials accessible for your learners, and it also has ancillary resources. So this was updated as recently as April of 2018, and you can go through and read more about these and then review them. And as I scroll down the page, you'll see here that not only did I have the license here, this is that little icon down here at the bottom, but I also have ways that I can pull this particular textbook down. Now remember, with a CC BY license, or Creative Commons Attribution, I could pull this down into as a Word document, and I can then edit it. So I could do this open document text file, okay? Because remember, Microsoft Word isn't an open resource. It's something you have to pay for. But OpenOffice allows you to download this. You could edit it. You can bring it into Microsoft Word if you wanted to and make some changes, because there might be things in a Canadian-based textbook that you would want to change, maybe the examples or something like that. Okay, they have PowerPoint slide. You can go to and read it online so you can see if you like it. So this is just one example of a textbook, and I happen to like Open Washington because they lead you onto other repositories for open textbooks. I happen to like what the Canadians do, and they have all of these different subject areas, and you can search, but it's not nearly as robust as maybe just going by title. So the other materials here is this Jennifer Jennings link. I'm not going to open it up in the room. Is a wonderful kind of testimonial from an adult basic ed teacher who is not a techie person, who went out and found an open textbook for her adult basic ed course, and it gives her story about how she did that and how much she loves it and how much her learners love it. So here's the Orange Grove collection. This is another repository, and I'm going to go ahead and just click on this, see if I can get this one to open up. Yeah, of course, there we go. This is out of Florida. I think that kind of makes sense. It's Orange Grove. Let me see if I can make this a little bit bigger. So this, again, is pretty much the same type of thing where you can browse the collections, you can browse resources, and again, if you're looking to adopt textbooks, this is going to take a little time because you have to, what's your subject area? What is it that you want to be using? And they also provide links to a lot of different types of repositories and collections. So in these cases, here's a comprehensive outline of world history when it was updated just 22 months ago. And you can look here and be able to show the attachments to this, and later on look at the different, if I looked at this title here, I can see, well, here's a brief description, and here, now people go, wait, I thought this was open, this says buy this book. Well, in this particular case, they may be charging a little bit to help pay for the fees of the teachers creating it. Without me going in and looking at it, you know, it's probably not very expensive because these books typically aren't. So here is the conditions of use, right? They may have some material, and this is why this is here, this copyright or other restrictions. Sometimes they'll use material specifically with permissions, like say an image, so they'll note that. So that means that you have to continue with those same notations that there is materials in there that they were used with permission in this particular book. Probably means that you have to maintain the credit for that book. But as you can see, these are pretty robust. These have been around for quite a while. In this case, this one's been around for 10 years, but it has recently been updated. And that's one of the things that is wonderful about open textbooks, because they do actually update very quickly. And so you can get a brand new textbook every semester without having to go through review processes, etc. These others here, this is a Open Now English Composition textbook. Again, this is also out of the Orange Grove, and in this case, we have a PDF, we have a Word document, we also have the learning objectives in a spreadsheet, and you can see here all of the rights, when it was created, etc. So each one of these, this one doesn't have any costs associated with it, and you can see what the conditions of use are. And so this is just a matter of me, I can just click this link and download this file. And you as teachers or administrators can then review that information. You've got all this time now over summer, correct? You can just take a look at all of these different types of resources. Now, there's some other ones that may be a little more interesting that are not entirely about textbooks. Cool4Ed is actually a California-based repository for textbooks. So if I click on this link, it's going to open up Cool4Ed. And this is based here in California, and they have wonderful resources both in terms of textbooks as well as other types of resources, so simulations, games, etc. So each one of these have different, as you can see, different links of looking for accessibility, look for a collection. Up here I've got in this little black bar here, I can go and look at, if you're interested in career and technical training, what do they have available here? And again, these are available to you in different formats. So if I look, healthcare training open courseware. So who knows what they're offering? Here's Health Information Technology Foundations course. Here's Health E-Learning Simulations. Now this one is out right now. It looks like it's being revised. And then here's Healthcare Skill Bites. And again, by exploring all of these, you'll get an idea of, you know, where you can download the information, how it was reviewed, gives you a little summary of what that particular course is about. This took me out to Skill Commons. So you may be familiar with those sites or not, but this is, again, it's a repository. It's a place to find information about different types of resources. My favorite, and that's why I left it for last here, is this OER Commons. OER Commons is a huge repository, and I'm sorry, it looks like my graphics here have gone over by text there, but these icons, these little graphics here, are specifically related to adult education resources, where across the state, across the United States, several adult education teachers were brought together through links to create, if you're not aware of links, we'll talk about that in just a few minutes, of looking at and evaluating different open educational resources that they specifically used with adult learners. So I'm going to go out to OER Commons here, and I'm going to look for these groups. So I'm going to go to the top of this page where it says groups, and you'll see the featured groups. I don't know if you can see this right here, but 2 of our adult education groups are kind of like trending on the site. That's how popular they are. And I was actually talking to one of the chief principal folks at the organization that maintains this site, and they're in love with adult educators. We're very active on this site. So I'm going to open up this group, which is an adult education open community of resources. And when I open this up, you'll see a little description up here, and that there are 256 members. I encourage you to join. And there's over almost 300 affiliated resources that these teachers have gone through and they have looked at and reviewed. Some of them have been actually reviewed through the site's rubric. It's a 5-step rubric to review how good of a resource this is. And you can see that they've done adult ESL, digital literacy, math resources, some PD for teachers, and science, social studies, and workforce readiness. So in each one of these, let's try, does anybody have a preference? I'm not seeing much activity in the chat pod. Give me a subject you want to look at one of these in, and we'll go explore. So somebody's got to type. I just feel like I'm talking to myself here. Anything? Math. Okay. So we have, they've broken this out under sub areas, so we can look at numbers and operations, for example. And if I look at some of these, I can tell, well, I might go by title. Here's an integers, introduction to the concept of activities, and it's a lesson plan, and it was done by Susan Jones. So if I wanted to look at this lesson plan, it will give me the information on the left-hand side here, the education standards, right? And then this particular resource was actually reviewed. So this is the rubric that is used to review the alignment, the quality of explanations, the utility of the materials, the quality of the assessments, etc. And there's been several, well, over 3 people in most cases that have reviewed this. Sometimes you'll see here that there's some great comments from teachers. So Sharon Shoemaker, looks like she's done several comments here. And the conditions of use here is listed. So this is a CC BY lesson plan, so it needs to be it is Creative Commons licensed, and you give attribution to the author. So here we got Susan Jones making some comments, and they're showing how they're helping you as an instructor or administrator understand the quality of the information and how this particular, in this case, lesson plan was created. So if I want to look at that resource, I can just click on this link, View Resources, and then I can go out and view the description. It gives me a summary, okay? And if I open this up, this is pretty basic and straightforward, and then I can export it out here to Google Docs. I can save it to my own account, but I have to be logged in. So again, I encourage you to create an account and become a member of this group. And then you can go through and see even more of the materials that she created. She's provided the learning goals here, and then she's giving you some resources, giving you the chapters that she has created, etc. So you can tell that, you know, they put a lot of work into this material, and they are licensing it in such a way that they're saying, yeah, take my stuff and build upon it. Make it better. Make it better. Okay, Veronica, I'll go back and see if I can get to that go back to that group again and get to professional development. So again, I went to groups at the top of the page, and she asked me to look at professional development. So here we have some resources, teacher development appropriate to support ELLs, ABLE professional development, and teacher test resources. So each one of these may have different types of licensing. So again, I'd look at this, see if it's been reviewed. And there's custom permissions. So in this particular case, the author said, you know, well, there's some special stuff in here, so you'd have to look at what those permissions were. There were no comments made on this particular resource, but again, I could go out and view it. I can see who the authors are. It came from Stanford, and the provider said is understanding language, and then it has a nice abstract. So this, again, this isn't a full textbook, but you can see that in this particular repository from OER Commons, they have done a nice job of pulling together adult educators into these groups and asking them to help everyone to, you know, create materials for adult educators, because we are woefully undernourished when it comes to good open educational resources that are aligned to our learners' needs. These other groups that are here is the Adult Learning Zone. This is a great place for teachers to get together and design good open educational resources for adult ed. And the last one there on STEM is open educational resources for science, technology, engineering, and math. This one is for adult educators, and again, it's another group that if you are interested in science and math resources, they have come together and vetted several. So these are kind of my favorite places to find open educational resources. They are not the end-all, be-all, believe me. There's, like you saw earlier, 1.4 billion of them out there, so there's a lot. Here are some other samples of that I've put together in terms of, here's the Introduction to Tourism and Hospitality. It's another a Career Tech Ed course. CK12 is another flexible textbook place where you can pull textbooks and you can create them, and you can also download them in different forms. And this is one that's created, again, that allows you to mix and match and provide resources. And then this can be deployed digitally. You can make a PDF copy and put it on a website. Or you can make an EPUB version where a learner can bring it up on their Kindle if they have one. So each one of these, you can create your own classes here, and you can also customize this particular textbook. We hope to have additional workshops on using CK12 and creating these flexible textbooks, because I think this is a really good place to customize as you see fit. And these are all licensed under Creative Commons, again, where you can do just that. You can take materials from multiple sources and pull them into a textbook. Okay. Any questions so far? I see Veronica had a note there. We looked at professional development, but I'm not seeing much else. Is textbooks something you're interested in, or are you more interested in other types of resources? In the notes of the presentation, when you download it, for CK12, that place where you can create those flexible textbooks, in the notes of that PowerPoint presentation, there are some links to getting started on using CK12, as well as some YouTube videos on using Flexbooks. And so it's a way for you to kind of get your feet wet without too much time commitment to it first. So adult literacy fundamentals and mathematics. Some folks are really looking at ways to help their learners use math. So this, again, is my favorite folks out of BC Campus. And it, again, it's the same format where it's providing them a description. It tells us, you know, how they ask you to tell them how you're using your textbook. And then this is how you can download it. You can look at it in a website. So if I open this one up, because I didn't open up the other one that I showed you, then I can see what they've offered here. So here's our fundamental English. It's been faculty reviewed and adopted. And let's see if I can find Well, let's see the best way so you can actually look at this. Let's find a document. Let's just do, I don't know if I can open it on this Mac. I'm on a different machine here, see if I can actually bring it down for you so you can take a look at it. And no, it's not going to let me do it on this machine. That's okay. You've got the links. You can go through and look at those, and you can see here how they are licensed. And when I mentioned before that they are all linked, if you're not sure of what the license means, when you see this icon, if you don't remember what that means, there should be a link directly to what the license is. So if I click on that, it will take me out to the Creative Commons website, and it will tell me right here, this is what I can do with this. I can copy and redistribute the material. I can adapt it. I can remix it. I can transform it. Okay? And it gives me what the terms are. I have to give attribution and give proper credit. And again, these are links. And if I made any changes, I should try to give a little idea of how I changed it. Sometimes something as simple as correcting typographical errors you don't have to make note of. But if you change my pretty white polar bear to pink, you might want to tell them that, you know, you changed the tone or the color of the polar bear. So these are some other links. If you are looking for open educational resources for English language instruction, this particular site, if you are not familiar with links, this is a federal level organization, and I can never remember what the acronym stands for. It's some kind of National Communication System, but I can't remember what the LI stands for. So if somebody knows it, type it in the chat pod. But they have a whole program that they've done on using OER, so they have a fact sheet here for you. They can tell you why, you know, give you some ideas of why you use it, and then also, you know, where you can create your own, and you can find more information about using open educational resources in your adult ed classroom, especially for ESL learners. And again, they're going to link you back to that OER Commons site with the group for adult educators and how many of those sites that, or how many resources they have created for English language learners as well, ESL learners. If you're not looking for something you want to modify or change or make your own in any way, you might look at some sites, and this one is called Hippocampus. It's from an organization called NROC. And NROC created this site called Hippocampus, and this is free, and these provide you with resources and materials on all of the main classes, subject areas for high school completion: arithmetic, algebra, statistics, biology, chemistry, English, and religion. And each one of these allows you to come in and, you know, personally I just have fun coming in here and watching these different videos, so I can look at the presentations about U.S. history, and I can select a topic here about okay, the Queen's Corner, and I can look at, as it loads this video, I can then watch this video here, and since I'm on a Mac, it wants to make sure I want to use Flash. We'll see if it'll actually run for me, and maybe not. So sometimes let's see if I can get back to the Queen's Corner here and see if it'll load. I know that NROC is looking to, I'll play this, but you won't be able to hear it, but you can see they're nice, high quality videos available for your learners to use, and as teachers you can put together playlists, so you can create maybe a history playlist about one particular unit you might be working on. No work for the teacher, they just create this playlist for them. And again, this is on all of these different types of topics that we saw before. So I go back to the home page. If you don't want to do history, you can go back into economics, you can go into biology or chemistry. And these are all different collections. Again, they're free to use, no problems. And they've just put them in one place so it's easy for the teacher to get to. So that's Hippocampus from NROC organization. They're a nonprofit that provide a lot of open educational resources. And if you're interested in more about NROC Math, they have a product called EdReady. and that's a math assessment program, and OTAN does provide agencies access to using EdReady in a classroom situation where they want their learners to learn more about math at different levels, maybe for a career tech ed field or for basic algebra or passing the necessary math that you need to get into a community college. So if you're interested in some of those, let us know and just contact us at OTAN. So there's more here, not only with EdReady that I told you about and Hippocampus, but they also have other courses that can be brought into a learning management system. OTAN supports Moodle if you may have your own, and these are courses that may be available to you that you can use on your learning management system. So these are, there's a link here to the NROC network. This is a membership organization, so since we are a member, we tend to offer these services up to the adult ed field. And again, lots of notes on each one of these pages in terms of more about the individual slides themselves, including links, etc., of where you might find other members, and you can talk to them about working with the NROC network and using their resources for NROC Math online through a learning management system, or EdReady, which is an online math assessment program. So they've got lots of resources that might be useful to you. New America, this link here, this is kind of a nice one-stop shop to be able to get you started with finding out more about open educational resources. I like this because it was kind of a place to get started, because it can be very daunting about how do you move forward with working with open educational resources. So this one gives you the different sites, the descriptions, the grade levels, the content areas, etc. So it's just a list, but it might be a place for you to start, especially if you know what topic area you're interested in. And again, that's a slide on this presentation. So now that we get to the end of all of these repositories and all of these different websites, and whew, it's a lot of stuff. So I'd like to hear from you about, well, okay, now that I've got all this stuff, what do I do with it? So I'd really like to hear, because you guys are very, very quiet, about your intent or what you think you might like to do with using open educational resources. Would you use them with your learners, for example? What do you do next? What learners are you working with right now? And what are their needs? Would you use some of these resources to find some of them? Nothing from the crew. Okay. So here's some things that I'm going to give you as some guidelines. First of all, never ever make an assumption about resources that you find and you want to use. You always look at the license. You're going to find the license at the bottom of the page, like we did several of those that I showed you on screen. If you don't find them there, you need to do things like look at terms of use or the copyright link at the bottom, or there might be something like usage rights. If you decide to use them, you need to be able to provide the proper attribution. And again, Anthony linked that best practices, but if you can remember that title, author, source, and license, it will help you to do a proper attribution for the things that you use. If you're trying to figure out, okay, how do I keep track of all this stuff? Try thinking about using different types of bookmarking resources. Some people put the bookmarks right into their browsers, or you might use different types of cloud services to keep copies or keep the links to where your different resources are. You might want to just become a member of a repository like OER Commons and use their abilities to allow you to save those resources in a little mini folder on their system. So it's a way for you to kind of be able to go back, and maybe you're going to review 2 or 3 at a time or something like that. Just use whatever resources you have available to keep track of them. So the benefits. We talked about this before, about now we see the generosity of authors being willing to share their materials. The other benefits that sometimes aren't so obvious is that there is a cost benefit. It doesn't mean they're free as in no cost, because there's still something that comes in cost. Whether there's time in looking for them and adopting them. There's time that may be in revising them in some way or modifying them so they fit best with your learners. There could be cost as in having them printed for your learners, or you extend that cost to your learners and you give them a digital copy and they go and print a copy. But there's lots of statistics and there's lots of research out there showing how using open educational resources do save learners significant amount of money, and there is no discernible impact on the difference of the level of learning, whether or not they had a $300 textbook or whether they had a $25 textbook that they printed at their local print shop. So it's something that's, we're really looking at trying to help the learner meet their goals. So using open educational resources that are rich in content and multimedia and all that kind of thing, which you find in those textbooks or other resources, can help your learners get to their learning goals much quicker. So another thing I would do is that another benefit that happens, that we've seen this over and over again, when you engage learners in using open educational resources, get them to create open educational resources. Now you're really going to see some interesting adaptations and changes and improvements, perhaps on all of the OER that you use. And that's one of the things we found in some of the projects we've worked on in the past, is that learners are wonderful creators. And now if they license their work in a similar way, then you have access to what they have created as well. Think of it as a learner is going to create they're going to gain far more skills beyond just learning about what that content was in that particular thing. Now if you ask them to create, wow, now they really learn that content and they gain some new skills, maybe some digital literacy skills, some creation skills with particular software. Okay. So if you want more data on that, I put Jennifer Jennings up here again, because this is one to show your teachers and or your administrators. But then there's a nice research paper that came out of Texas about students using digital textbooks. And there's some great data there in terms of how they did it and how it impacted their learners and how valuable it was to their district as a whole. There's no reason for me to open these because they're on the presentation, so please be sure to download that. Sometimes there's a lot of obstacles in trying to adopt something new. Some of these strategies that come to the fore are, first and foremost, start small. Identify goals very clearly. What is it that you're wanting to do? If you just need one thing, I need a really good blank textbook. Define what that really means. Make your goal very smart. Remember, it's specific, measurable, achievable, and time-bound, right? Relevant and time-bound. So make sure that those pieces are together and identify the stakeholders. Identify those enthusiastic teachers that like to do this type of work. And then engage them. Get your TOSAs involved. Get your coordinators involved. And work with your print shop. If you have a librarian, find them. Make friends with them, because they are one of the best resources to help you with not only finding open educational resources, but also helping you with strategies for implementation. So a lot of times teachers find OER or they find them and they never use them because they don't have some type of team in place to help them. And this is a way that by using this kind of start small, identify single goal, work with a team, you're going to have a lot more success of actually getting those OER implemented into your organization. So here's some other suggestions that work along the same thing. Remember that by using OER, you may be able to reallocate some of the funds that you normally use for textbooks into something that benefits your staff, including development of additional curriculum, or you're sending your teachers to professional development that will help to impact the success of your learners. So now you might be able to take that same team and instead of paying for a textbook, you can now pay them to create curriculum that is directly aligned to your learners and your community needs. And always, always remember, whatever you do create, consider licensing it. Okay, and there's a link here to an attribution builder that can help you with the proper attribution, but it's a way for you to not only give credit to other folks of the works that you use that is theirs, but also to ensure that if anybody uses your work, that you have given some thought of how you want that work to be recognized, how you want that work to be used. Okay. So we don't have a very talkative group here today, so I'm just going to leave this question up here to think about how could using OER impact your situation in adult education. What would be your next steps into using OER? Would you do it individually? Would you do it as a team? Do you have a team in place right now that you could approach and say, hey, you know, we were talking about we needed a new textbook for doing social studies. Maybe we could find an OER textbook that's already created and we could tailor it to our learners. And let's see how that might look. Do you see a value for using open educational resources at your agency? If not now, maybe in the future. What might that look like? Okay, so that kind of gets us to that next question about, you know, what's the next step? And this is for you individually. You might want to do an open educational resource workshop at your agency. Between OTAN and our partners with AEBG TAP, we can help you with not only looking for and understanding what are open educational resources, but we can also work you through creating open educational resources and how to properly apply a license. It's not nearly as complex as you think it is. It sounds like it, but it isn't. So please, if you're interested in doing more with open educational resources, you can use the support ticket, which I see Veronica has already posted in the chat pod, and ask for us to come and help you and your teachers, your agency, to recognize and see if open educational resources are useful for your agency. And this is just about OTAN. We are a partner with the AEBG TAP, but I want you to understand that if you are an agency that receives federal WIOA Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act monies, we do offer training in technology integration. We have materials for teachers in terms of digests for both administrators and teachers. We do a lot with teaching with technology in terms of materials on our website, and we also have our own little technology integration symposium, the Technology and Distance Learning Symposium. This next year we'll have it somewhere down south in Southern California, and we encourage everyone to come. And you go to the AEBG TAP Summit, and that's a lot about great teaching resources and being able to manage your classroom well. OTAN does more alignment with integrating and identifying great technology tools that can help you both as a teacher as well as an administrator in managing classrooms and or workflows. So we can help you there. So last but not least, I'm going to say thank you for being here today. Please note that this work is licensed as Creative Commons, so you are free to take a copy of it and modify it. All that I ask is that you give credit to OTAN as providing this information to you. So I hope you got a little something out of the session today, and I thank you so much for joining us. And Veronica, I'll give it back to you so you can send people off to where they need to go.
Thank you so much, Penny, and thank you all for participating in today's webinar. We will have session number 2 next Friday, June 22nd, with Penny Pearson, and she'll be presenting on open educational resources again, but a second part of this. I'm going to close the room now, and once I close it, the evaluation will appear on your screen. Please be sure to complete the evaluation. It only takes a minute or two to let Penny know what you thought about today's presentation, provide any feedback, and then if there are any technical assistance or professional development needs you have, such as you would like this workshop at your school site, you can do so via the evaluation as well. Diana has posted to please follow us on Twitter at AEBG Office for news and upcoming events and things that we have going on as well. It's a great way for us all to stay connected. And then Penny also said, do not forget to download the presentation out of the resource pod. The PowerPoint presentation will also be available on the website in just a few minutes, as well as the recording to this webinar. So you can check out all of those resources on the new California Adult Education website. Thank you all so much for your time, and you have a great day.